Colossus is the most advanced lineup optimizer in daily fantasy sports. Lock and exclude players. Adjust player exposure to reduce risk of injury or poor performance. Customize individual projections or upload your own projections. Generate hundreds of optimal lineups in seconds. Name and save the best lineups. Create winning lineups for the top sites like DraftKings and FanDuel for free at dailyfantasycafe.com.
Hello and welcome to the Injury Report podcast, covering week one, obviously it being Monday, not covering Monday night games. Hopefully there's no injuries to report from that one, especially because we got a lot of these guys heavily owned in one of the two games at least. But we'll go ahead and recap some big injuries, their fallout, who's going to step up, who could step up, who's going to see increased role, decreased role, all these things. So starting off with the number one, Dez Bryant. We saw him leave the game, getting his foot taped up, trying to give it a go, couldn't, kept trying. Find out he has a broken foot, so need to get a screw put in. They're saying 4 to 6 weeks, some speculating longer. I'm certainly no doctor. I go by what I hear and similar injuries, things like that. Dante Stallworth tweeted earlier about his similar injury. He said he was out 6 to 7 weeks, so got to anticipate something like that. And while that does hurt Tony Romo, we did see Tony Romo do plenty well in the fourth quarter of the game last night where the Cowboys were trailing double digits in the fourth quarter. He brought him back to win. My take here is that Jason Witten is going to be the biggest benefactor here, and it makes sense. We saw Witten had a pretty big role anyway. He's been a go-to guy for Romo for years now. So give him a huge bump up, probably into the upper echelon of tight ends. Obviously that being Rob Gronkowski, everyone else, but include Jason Witten in that B list, I should say, and then everyone else. But certainly a big bump for him. Terrence Williams is a guy who is going to be a popular play this week, you'd imagine. Maybe not quite the Devontae Adams of this week, but probably pretty close because this is a passing attack that has volume. I mean, especially when they're down. Joseph Randle looked fine last night, but not a guy that's going to be necessarily the bell cow like Murray was. Maybe they go more with the running game because they do have a nice stable of backs there. Going to be interesting to see, but I certainly think that Witten, Terrence Williams, going to be more popular plays. You got Cole Beasley and Gavin Escobar, guys that don't see a whole lot of volume, but Lance Dunbar, though, did have 8 catches for 70 yards, so keep your eye on him in the passing game. I mean, he looked great. He made a couple great catches. He looked fast. He was elusive in the open field, so that's another guy to look for here. Unfortunately for Cowboys fans with Dez Bryant going out, luckily they got the win, but certainly something to monitor moving forward. Derek Carr injured his throwing hands on a play against the Bengals there. Matt McGloin came in and actually did pretty well. Threw a quick interception, but ended up 23 for 31, 142 yards, 2 touchdowns with that interception. But this was also a game that was well in hand by that point, and both those two touchdowns came after trailing by 33 points. So take that with a grain of salt. Obviously, if you're going against a defense, kind of a prevent type of defense where the team's already up by 33 points, a lot easier to throw the ball and have some success than if this is a 7, 10, 14-point game. So keep that in mind. Also saw that they're talking to Christian Ponder now as a potential. So good luck with that one. Not a guy that's going to be on my radar at all. Derek Carr, I mean, certainly the most talented of this bunch, even when you throw Ponder in there. There's a reason why Ponder is not an NFL quarterback right now. But keep that in mind. On the other side of this one, we saw Terrell Suggs. Big loss for the Ravens defense there. I believe it was a torn Achilles. He's now out for the year, so that's unfortunate. And, you know, this was a Ravens team that had a very good defense this week there. So it's going to be interesting seeing them against the Raiders next week, obviously without Terrell Suggs. So keep that in mind. Going to be an interesting matchup there with a Raiders defense that got shut out for most of the game. A couple garbage time touchdowns. Still a Ravens defense. This is a very well-coached unit, perennial top 10 team. So got to expect this is still going to be a pretty popular play despite Terrell Suggs being out. Next up, Andre Ellington has a grade 1 PCL strain. Cardinals against the Bears. Good news for the Cardinals is it's the Bears, and looks like Ellington out 2 to 3 weeks, so now your offseason signing that maybe some people liked, most of us didn't. Chris Johnson, CJ2K, if you will. He's the guy, one of the worst players that still has a nickname, if you ask me. He's going to step into this role. This is a bad Bears defense. They didn't look as bad as many of us anticipated in week 1, but Chris Johnson, definitely the guy that's going to be stepping into a bigger role here. And, this Bears defense is going to be having to worry about hopefully a healthy Michael Floyd. You got John Brown, Larry Fitzgerald. Fells looked pretty good against the Saints as well. Floyd only got the 1 target, but he was a guy that was not completely healthy. Had dislocated fingers, multiple fingers. So keep this on your radar for next week because this is still a bad Bears defense that can be beat. So maybe we hear some word about Chris Johnson's workload. Maybe we hear about someone else. Maybe they're going to rely on the passing game. Either way, this is still a pass-first offense in Arizona. So this is going to be the Carson Palmer show, I would imagine, here next week. Next up, T.Y. Hilton bruised his knee, facing off against the Jets next week. This is a Jets defense that looked good week 1, but also happened to play the Browns. So no offense to Browns fans, but this may be the worst offense in all of football. They looked awful. We saw Josh McCown leave with an injury, and then Johnny Manziel come in and do exactly what he did last year, and that's turn the ball over and not move the ball down the field. Did have the 1 touchdown pass, which was a great play, but outside of that, he didn't look good. This is a bad offense. So the Jets certainly going to have a tougher time with Andrew Luck and company here, and we don't know the status yet of T.Y. Hilton. He did have 14 targets on Sunday, only caught 7 of them, but Dante Moncrief, Andre Johnson, going to be guys that step up in his absence. Moncrief caught a touchdown this week. Dwayne Allen could see a sizable boost as well. So keep your eye on this because obviously this is a team that relies heavily on the pass, as more heavily than any other team. Obviously Frank Gore was banged up this week. He was ineffective at best. I mean, it may be even generous to call him ineffective this week. He was just not good. But very, very tough matchup against that Bills defense. So facing off against the Jets, it's a fine defense, but we'll be looking to see if Andrew Luck going to be able to turn this thing around this week. Got to imagine that he can. So keep your eye on these cheap guys, Moncrief and Andre Johnson. That's going to wrap things up. Those are your major injuries for week 1. Moving towards week 2. Check us out on Twitter at DF Cafe. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Got a lot of great content. Still some MLB content. A lot of NFL content. College football even coming up this week. Once again, at dailyfantasycafe.com.